Welcome back to Through the Big Book with Dr. Ben. My name is Ben and I'm an alcoholic. This will be There is a Solution, Part 3. We're on page 23 and we're about a third of the way into that first whole paragraph. It says if you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he'll offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of a man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of the alcoholic, he'll laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. So fallacious means false, and so, and again, we're transitioning here. We've transitioned into the mind and out of the physical part of the disease, and the sentence that we read right before in the last episode says, therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. So that's where we're going on here. And this paragraph is talking about, if you just got a DUI and lost your car, or you're in jail, or you were verbally or physically abusive to somebody you love, or you got these fines, or blah, 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 you're having these terrific consequences, then why would you drink? Well, I had a really bad day, or I had a really great day, or whatever, but none of that stuff comes close to being level with the consequences that we experience from drinking, So it says, once in a while he may tell the truth. And the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. Some drinkers have excuses with which they're satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts, they really don't know why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they're a baffled lot. There's the obsession that somehow, someday, they'll beat the game, but they often suspect they're down for the count. I can't tell you how many times, I knew that I was playing with fire every time I took a drink. But I had this this mind that couldn't tolerate sobriety. And plus everybody, it seemed like, drinks, Everybody that I was around was drinking. Maybe I had a bad choice in friends. Maybe everybody did drink. It's not really that important. The fact is that I had consequences every time. I almost every time I drank, they got worse and worse the more I drank. The more I would black out, the worse the consequences would be. Also, there was this change of brand or environment and all these things that they talk about. I'm not going to drink liquor anymore. I'm just going to drink beer. Whenever I drink beer, I'm only going to drink this many. Whatever. I'm just going to do drugs, which is crazy to say, but there was a time in sobriety where I didn't drink, because I was an alcoholic and I was sober, but yet I smoked weed and I took stimulant pills and I would occasionally do cocaine. But I was sober, and if you ask me, I was an alcoholic and I don't drink. I don't mess with that stuff. Yet who could tell you what I was under the influence of at that moment? Because I thought I was beating the game. I thought I was getting around this. And those are just a couple of examples of a multitude, a myriad of options that we try to beat this game by. It says how true this is, few realize. In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal. But everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will arouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will. Everybody wants us to be able to beat this on our own willpower, because they might have seen us succeed in other areas of life. But as we'll learn in this chapter and the next chapter, and the one following that in We Agnostics, that we need something more than our own human willpower. It's just simply not enough. It says the tragic truth is that if the man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. He's lost control. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, this is so important, says he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. This tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it's suspected. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We're unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago, or without defense against the first drink. So there's no real telling when it is that we actually became an alcoholic, or if there's some kind of threshold that we passed, or if we were born that way. You know, science tells us that there are genetic predispositions, which means that we have little genes, if you will, that are coded in a certain way that make us more likely to develop alcoholism. But whatever, that's really not that important. The thing is here we are alcoholics. What are we going to do about it, right? And then the loss of power of choice. That's like, it's saying that I can no longer make the decisions in order whether I'm going to drink or not. It's Friday night. That's just what I do. Saturday night, where are we going next? Sunday, have a hair of the dog that bit you kind of thing. Monday, you can't do it. So on Mondays, we take pills or we do this. On Tuesday, Taco Tuesday, turn up. Wednesday, Whiskey Wednesday, Thirsty Thursday. Then you're back to Friday again. It's just crazy. And the fact that, last time you drank tequila on Taco Tuesday, you XYZ. Never do that again. But yet here we are the next week drinking tequila on Tuesday, on Taco Tuesday. We just forget all about it because it's Taco Tuesday again. Let's go. The almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they're hazy and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. There's a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on the hot stove. Yeah, this time's going to be different. This time I've eaten, this time I've got a different brand. This stuff is fancy. I'm drinking fancy beer tonight that was made by monks. But they were also making cheese and stuff. So, of course, no bad things are going to happen. That was only whenever I drank that 4 whatever. I don't want to advertise for any alcohol companies, but that 4 crazy stuffs, we'll call it, and turned into a jackass and destroyed blah, blah, blah. Well, just don't drink that again. This is going to be different. And plus, we're going to be laying low in the house. It's going to be different this time, right? The alcoholic may say to himself in the most casual way, it won't burn me this time. So here's how. Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. How often have some of us begun to drink in this nonchalant way, and after the 3rd or 4th pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, for God's sake, how did I ever get started again? Only to have that thought supplanted by, well, I'll stop with the 6th drink, or what's the use anyhow? That is just, I can't tell you how familiar that is to me, how much of a chord that strikes in me. You have one beer, you're going to have a 6-pack. Let's say you're trying to keep it chill and just have 3 or 4 beers or something. Well, then you run out. Well, I'm going to go get a 12-pack so that way I don't have to get any for tomorrow. Or a bottle of liquor. So I can just have a little bit and then be good for the night. But you know what happens. You're not going to just have one little sip out of that thing. We end up drinking half the bottle or the whole damn bottle. Pounding on the bar and saying, screw it. It's what they're saying. What's the use anyhow? F it. Just give up and get drunk. It says when this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he's probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up may die or go permanently insane. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. So what they're saying here is, we all think that, what this tells me is we all think that we're different. We all think that we can beat the game, that we're special, and that we can outsmart this thing. And we'll be different. We're not like all those other guys who wound up under the bridge or whatever. But this is saying that we don't really have that many options, or we at least we didn't used to. Locked up, die, or go permanently insane. I hear a lot of times locked up, sobered up, or covered up, as in buried. And the facts have been confirmed by legions. That's a unit of measurement. I can't remember exactly what that is. I want to say it's 5 or 15. One source said 20,000. I'm not really certain exactly what that is. Nonetheless, we're talking about a lot of alcoholics have confirmed those facts of locked up, covered up, or sobered up. Then it says, but for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop, but cannot. There is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings which the process requires for successful consummation. And consummation basically just means finalized. It says, but we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we'd been living it. When therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. So the whole chapter is titled, There is a Solution. The paragraph is headed by, There is a Solution. And that, what we just read, is the solution. It's kind of tucked away there in the middle of a paragraph. But it says, pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. That's it. That is the solution. Kind of vague, but let's keep reading. We found much of heaven, and we've been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence which we had not even dreamed. Wow, that sounds pretty lofty, right? What does that mean? Rocketed into heaven and fourth dimensions and all that? It makes a lot more sense on a second time through or a third time through after you've seen all this stuff. It almost seems a little misplaced to me, but I'm not an editor, so I shouldn't really be commenting on that. Nonetheless, what they're saying here is that we've had this huge vital spiritual experience, which we'll talk about in a couple of pages. So I'm just going to go ahead and move right into it, because it's, as far as the fourth dimension, you hear people talk about all kinds of things. Well, it's this, it's that. It's the in-between, it could be part of a physics thing. I've heard people say like mass times width times length and equals the volume of a cube or something. And then the fourth dimension's like what's inside of it, or I can't tell you how many weird things I've heard about that. But to me, it just basically means the realm of the spiritual. And I just leave it at that. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we've had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He's commenced to accomplish those things for us which we never could do by ourselves. So we see there at that in the first sentence, there's a little asterisk that says that it's fully explained in Appendix 2. So let's go ahead and turn back there now. That is on page 567. 567. Spiritual experience is Appendix 2. It says the term spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which upon careful reading shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. All right. Yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes or religious experiences must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals, like a burning bush. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous or false. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety because they develop slowly over a period of time. That has absolutely been my case. I have had some very powerful spiritual moments, but it has taken me a really long time to feel like, to have this profound change in my reaction to life. It takes time. Some people get it overnight. I haven't seen many of them. I've heard of them. I don't really know that it's ever happened from my experience, but it says it in here and people talk about it, so it must be true, right? Most of the people that I've worked with, it takes time for them to really have a big change in life. But there comes a time when it kind of clicks, where something kind of snaps into place, and they feel different, and they respond to life different, and they go about life differently. But there's not a specific time in which it occurs, but it always occurs along the path, of spiritual development in this program. They don't just, fast from red meats or something. It comes from doing the spiritual work. So it said he finally realizes that he's undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life. That's what we're talking about here. That's the vital spiritual experience. It's not about being able to levitate, or quote big fancy prayers at the dinner table in front of your family and say all these impressive things and have all these charades that you can perform in front of people. It's just about a alteration in your reaction to life. You want an example of that? Like, let's say somebody cuts you off in traffic. That seems to be the most popular thing people like to talk about. What happens when somebody cuts me off in traffic? I have an option right there. I have choices right there. I can respond with my emotions and show the traffic sign language and yell and honk or whatever, or I can take a big breath and think, hey, maybe that person has XYZ going on. It's none of my business. Nonetheless, I've got brakes. They work. All I got to do is push on the little pedal and it slows down. No harm, no foul. Move on with your life. And the same thing goes with anything. What's making me upset today? Am I getting bent out of shape and all stressed out because I'm running 200 miles an hour because I have to do the dishes? I'm all stressed out over doing the dishes, or because maybe somebody called me a name and I just let it just blow me up out of proportion. Now I want to fight them. That's not a healthy reaction to life. That happens to all of us. It doesn't matter whether you're an alcoholic or not. Having a profound, a poor reaction to life leads us to want to drink more, because now we're all bent out of shape and upset or sad or whatever the case may be. And so the better we can handle life on life's terms and take it with grace and peace and dignity and respond rather than react, we have this spiritual awakening. And so we'll talk about that more here. It says that such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. And the things that I'm saying here are radically simplifying it. I just want to say that. There's so much more content on this. Books and libraries could be written on this stuff, really. I want to say that. This is a huge simplification of the topic. So it says, what often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. How do they do that? So with few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. Okay, so when we talk about God, it's a name to identify a concept of a power greater than yourself. That's it. That you can call God Allah, you could call God God, you can call him the universe. I read a book recently where they were talking about the source, nature, all kinds of different, it does not matter as long as it's not you. We're just talking about the power, a concept of a power greater than yourself. You can call electricity pixie dust if you want. You could call electricity the lights. You can call it whatever you want. It's still just electricity. That's just the name that we use to call it that. It's just a concept. Electricity itself is a concept of electrons moving around and combustion and blah, blah, blah. It's just a name to describe a concept. The same thing goes with this power greater than ourselves. I hope that helps. Most of us think that this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness. Most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. So let's start with honesty. Do you think that honesty is something that is a spiritual concept? Or do you think that I should go around lying to people? Should I lie to you? Would that be a spiritual concept? Would that be helping you? I don't think so. I think maybe I should be honest. I think that that's something that I can get behind. I think that if there's my concept of a power greater than myself, I think that if there is such a thing, that it would prefer me to be honest. I've got an open mind to that. Well, now look, I haven't closed my mind to all spiritual concepts. It's just as simple as that. All these other things, names, and you have to do this on the first Sunday of March or whatever, or on December 20 whatever, if this happens, you do not have to follow any of that. All we have to have is an open mind for just something. It doesn't even have to be honesty. Maybe you don't agree with me on being honest, and you think that being dishonest is the way to go. Dude, do that. If that's your thing, be dishonest. Maybe you're into whatever. Hope. You think that hope is something that you should have and that you should give to others. Then do that. But you also think you should be dishonest to them. Then be dishonest. Do your thing, man. But the thing here is, if you can get behind one spiritual concept, then that's all you need to make a start. It says he can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are dispensable. So you'll hear people say the how and the why of the program. The how, the HOW, is honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. So we've got to have those. Then moving on, it says there's a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. And that principle is contempt prior to investigation. So that's kind of a wordy phrase, but what we're saying here is don't knock it till you try it. That's the bottom line here. You probably heard that before. So we're talking about, just to get back to ground zero here, we're talking about how do I recover from alcoholism? How do we do this? Well, this book's talking about God, or a concept of a power greater than myself, and that is what's going to help me to stay sober. Well, maybe you're like, I don't know about that, man. That just doesn't work for me. I just can't get behind that. I don't understand. I don't have God all figured out. Nobody does, dude. That's my answer to that. No one does. I don't. I absolutely do not. I read about my concept of God every day in all kinds of different books. I seek. It's just an amazing process, but I don't have it all figured out, and I hope that I never do, because the seeking is kind of part of the beauty of it, to be honest. But you can't knock using spiritual principles, to treat alcoholism. You can't knock it and say that it won't work if you've never tried. Until you've prayed and you've done all this stuff and you've given your life over to your concept of a power greater than yourself, to solve your problem, there's really not a leg to stand on. That's the only thing that can keep you in everlasting ignorance, and is proof against all arguments for yourself, which means you're just paying lip service. You're not saying anything of content because you have no experience. That's what this is saying here. Because let's be honest, for some of us, like myself, that's a pretty big ask to have me talk about God or talk about any of this stuff. It's like, I don't want to do that. Surely there's got to be another way. But here I was defeated. I tried everything else, probably like you have, and I wound up in this same spot. So I had no other choices. I had no other choice but to give it a shot. And you can say fake it until you make it if you want. I certainly like that phrase when it applies here because I didn't believe. I'll just be honest. I did not believe in what I was doing, but I believed that because the guy, Dr. Halvorsz, rest in peace, got and stayed sober and was a physician and believed in God, that if he did it, that I could at least give it a shot because nothing that I'd tried before had ever worked. And I always wanted to be a doctor, and I respected the heck out of him because he was just such a cool guy. So I figured if he can do it, maybe I can get behind it. And you know what? That's all I needed to make a start, to start an effective journey toward sobriety. So that concludes this episode of There's a Solution, including the appendix on the spiritual experience. So we'll pick up right back in There's a Solution where we left off in the next episode. So I'll see you there.